Good morning and welcome to Omaha. I want to welcome all our owners, our long-term owners, those that have recently become a shareholder. Again, thank you for joining us in Omaha for the meeting. Obviously very excited by this, and I want to also touch on, we have many people here just experiencing it, so just great to be together. The first thing I just want to touch on, we had the video, incredible 60 years. The one thing I did know that we've traditionally had was we've often had a movie which included the credits that came with it, and the video and we'll have a few other videos I'll touch on later. But we did have an exceptional producer, an executive producer, and I want to thank her because it wasn't acknowledged. Susie Buffett, thank you. And then the director who's always done the movies, again, did this video and will do our company videos that I'll touch on shortly. Brad Underwood, thank you, Brad. Now, we have a great day planned, and it's really all around our owners. It's our culture, but most importantly, this is our Owners' Day, our Owners' Weekend. We have an exceptional group of owners, and we're just passionate to be here. We'll communicate a variety of things around Berkshire and our insurance, our operating subsidiaries, and Berkshire as a whole. But what we really treasure is the engagement with our owners, our shareholders, and the questions that come. So thank you. Really appreciate it. Now, to touch on this morning, we have 3 sessions that we'll cover over the morning, early afternoon. The first session, there'll be some pleasantries here, and then we'll move into a business update. That'll be the first session. As we move into the second session, I'll have Ajit Jain join us here on stage. We'll obviously take any questions, so it'll be a question and answer period. We'll do the traditional rotating between our shareholders and Becky. Becky, thank you for being here. And we'll do the traditional Q&A. And then that session will wrap, and then we'll move to a third session that will have Katie Farmer. Katie is been the CEO of BNSF, our railway, for the past 5 years. And then we'll also be joined by Adam Johnson, who is a 10-year CEO of NetJets, but also took on an incremental role recently, and we announced that in December. Adam took on the Consumer Products Group, Services, and Retailing Group. So we'll have them join us for the third session, again, the traditional question and answer period. The only thing that I would say, this is also a little bit incremental or different from past meetings. Throughout this morning, we'll have 3 different videos associated with operating companies. The first one will be from Geico. Nancy Pierce, who's the CEO of Geico, long-term veteran and wealth of experience with Geico. She's over in the manager section. She'll narrate a video on Geico. And then we'll also have a video on NetJets narrated by Adam, and a video narrated by Katie on BNSF, the railway. So that'll be incremental. Now, the fundamental purpose of both having some incremental managers join us on the stage and the videos, we have an exceptional team at Berkshire. The depth of management's very deep. Obviously, we have a number of subsidiaries, but the depth of our team is great. And this is an opportunity through the videos or having incremental leaders on stage. It's an opportunity for you as our owners to both learn more about those businesses, but also about the leaders that lead them. And that will be a format that as we go forward, we'll build on, i.e. we can introduce you to other leaders either on stage or through the videos. So let's move to the formalities now. I'm going to introduce our directors. I'm going to do it alphabetically. So if they could just acknowledge with a wave or however they would like to acknowledge our shareholders, our owners. Start with Howard Buffett. Susie Buffett. Our chairman, Warren Buffett. Warren, we have a little surprise there for you. If you look up to the right, you'll see a jersey and a number. We're retiring. Warren, appropriately, it's number 60 for 60 years as our CEO of Berkshire. Equally, it's being it's placed beside Charlie's jersey, number 45. Charlie was with Berkshire for 45 years, obviously our vice chairman and a treasured partner of Warren, and it's just reflective of a great partnership. Thank you, Warren. I'm happy to report both those jerseys will remain in the rafters for the years to come. So, great. Now we'll continue with our directors. Steve Burke. Ken Chenault. Chris Davis. Our lead director, and I'll just add a point here because it's Sue's 20th year as a director of Berkshire. Thank you for being our lead director and all you do. Sue Decker. Charlotte Guyman. Ajit Jain. I would just add for relative to Ajit, obviously been our vice chairman of insurance for 9 years. I had many years to be his co-chairman. But one thing I just want to touch on, Ajit joined Berkshire in 1986. So not only is he a director, just been really the architect of our insurance business. So again, thank you, Ajit. Tom Murphy, Jr. Wally Weitz. Meryl Whitmer. Now I can start to, I think my eyes have adjusted a bit to the lights and everyone out there, and I have to tell a little bit of a story here because when Warren announced the transition last year, and I was sitting here and couldn't have been more proud, but I don't mind sharing, the first thing that flashed through my mind was, geez, we've already booked this arena. And I know the directors would be here, and I knew I would have some family here, but it's wonderful that I'll have you here, so thank you. Thank you. Now, back to a great tradition. I'm going to throw the mic over to Warren. Warren?
Thank you. Yeah. This is not my show today, but there are two. There are two anniversaries that we're kind of celebrating today. One is the fact that the board has had what I will generously call a refreshment, which they voted, and you couldn't have made a better decision. They did it unanimously. It was a surprise to all the board when I announced it last year, except for Susie and Howie. That's been 100% successful. Greg is doing everything I did and then some, and he's doing it better in all cases, and he's the right person. So that decision we score 100% on.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you.
But there's another anniversary today that I'd like to spend just a minute telling you about, because about 10 years ago, we made a commitment to essentially move 10% of the resources of Berkshire Hathaway. We turned it over to a person who was not that well known at the time. And we did that by spending roughly $35 billion buying stock in Apple Corp. And we were going to have that under the management. We're turning that money over to the management, essentially, of Apple to make Berkshire look good, and without any work by us, which is our preferred way of operating. And I would like to report that 10 years later, several things are happening. One is the $35 billion, counting dividends, realized appreciation, unrealized appreciation. But that has turned into $185 billion pre-tax. And I didn't have to do a damn thing. I mean, so it's, you know, we're very big around here on having other people do the work and collecting the money. But that has been a success. And we do look at marketable securities as being businesses. That doesn't mean we hold all of them forever. But we still, our largest holding is Apple. And Apple has a very interesting history that some of you may be familiar with. But one item is that they're observing an anniversary themselves, I think just within the last week or so. They celebrated their 50th anniversary. And, 50 years seems like a long time, but Apple seems like a very new company. And when Tim Cook went into the top position at Apple, he succeeded a legend. Steve Jobs was, everybody in America knew his name, and not many people knew Tim's name. And Apple had this roller coaster experience where the two Steves had started in a garage or something 50 years earlier, and then I'm not sure how many of you know, but Steve was thrown out for a while. He came back in. He did these marvelous things in terms of developing products, and then he had an untimely death, and everybody said, who's going to manage Apple when Steve Jobs isn't around? And probably just a very few percentage points of American investors had even heard of Tim Cook. And we, in effect, Tim took over about 14 years ago when Steve died. But when we made our investment and turned over 10% of the resources of Berkshire, we were turning it over to Tim. And as I say, he has turned that into 185 billion or something pre-tax, which we won't bother to compare to our record with. But Tim has announced that he's retiring as well. That's an announcement that's just been made in the last couple of years. And so I think it's appropriate if Tim would take a bow and our shareholders would say thanks to him. Tim is right by me. Would you like to step into the shoes of Steve and come through with his record? I mean, it's one of the miracles of American business management. And so, anyway, thank you, Tim, and I'm going to turn things back to Greg, and we'll go on.
Thank you, Warren. Tim, on behalf of our shareholders and owners here, we echo everything Warren said. And I would add one thing. You've truly been a global ambassador around the world for American business. Thank you. And Warren, thank you for taking the mic there. I am reminded I have a cherry Coke here in your honor, peanut brittle in Charlie's honor, and that seat remains open. Thank you, Warren. Now we'll move to a few more formalities and get into the business update. Really started with the letter to our owners and shareholders at the end of February. And I touched on it in the letter. I highlighted that the first thing as we transitioned, I wrote a letter to our 400,000 employees touching on culture and values. And the purpose of that letter was to highlight that was not going to change. It had never changed in Berkshire under Warren's 60 years. Aspects have evolved, but our culture and values did not change. And that as we did the transition, that was not going to change either. It's the bedrock of Berkshire, that culture and values. Now, one of the values we've often touched on here is integrity, There's no better example of Warren's remarkable demonstration of that when he testified before Congress in 1991 as the chairman and CEO of Salomon Brothers. I like to call it Berkshire's anthem, but I wanted to make sure we had that opportunity to see the video today. Berkshire's anthem.
I thank you for the opportunity to appear before this subcommittee. I would like to start by apologizing for the acts that have brought us here. The nation has a right to expect its rules and laws to be obeyed, and at Salomon, certain of these were broken. Almost all of Salomon's 8,000 employees regret this as deeply as I do, and I apologize on their behalf as well as mine. My job is to deal with both the past and the future. The past actions of Salomon are presently causing our 8,000 employees and their families to bear a stain. Virtually all of these employees are hardworking, able, and honest. I want to find out exactly what happened in the past so that this stain is borne by the guilty few and removed from the innocent. To help do this, I promise to you, Mr. Chairman, and to the American people, Salomon's wholehearted cooperation with all authorities. These authorities have the power of subpoena, the ability to immunize witnesses, and the power to prosecute for perjury. Our internal investigation has not had these tools. We welcome their use. As to the future, the submission of this subcommittee details actions that I believe will make Salomon the leader within the financial services industry in controls and compliance procedures. But in the end, the spirit about compliance is as important or more so than words about compliance. I want the right words and I want the full range of internal controls. But I also have asked every Salomon employee to be his or her own compliance officer. After they first obey all rules, I then want employees to ask themselves whether they are willing to have any contemplated act appear the next day on the front page of their local paper, to be read by their spouses, children, and friends, with the reporting done by an informed and critical reporter. If they follow this test, they need not fear my other message to them. Lose money for the firm, and I will be understanding. Lose a shred of reputation for the firm, and I will be ruthless. I welcome your questions.
Berkshire's anthem, that's embedded in Berkshire. We send a reminder to it's a great reminder to our CEOs and employees, our 400,000 employees, and we do remind them of that, including I ask our CEOs each year, just sent a letter in the first quarter, asking them as they run their business, as they make those daily decisions they make, apply that simple test that Warren highlighted, the newspaper test. Now, moving to the more formal update on our numbers. We, in fine tradition, we always start with our exhibit hall sales from the exhibit hall yesterday. And the interesting thing is last year was a record, as you may guess, but fortunately this year's sales were very consistent with 24. We're basically at 1.5 million sales. But the point is, we'd always love to get to 2 million, and we're not there yet. So we've got something to work on. But importantly, what the exhibit hall represents is our businesses showing their products and services, and you get to see this great commitment of our leadership team and their passion for Berkshire and their passion for the owners. I was fortunate to spend some time going through the exhibit hall yesterday. And that's a wonderful experience because we're getting the opportunity to engage with all of you as owners. So we treasure the exhibit hall, and what a great experience. And I'll just add, it's open till 4 o'clock today, and feel free to spend a little money. Now, truly moving to the more formal aspects of the business update. We issued our 10-Q this morning and had the related press release. You can see the results, and I'll touch on those. I'll start with Berkshire just as a whole. Obviously, we have our insurance, as I've referenced, as our heart of Berkshire was our foundation. But as we move to the non-insurance businesses, we're really fortunate to have a number of businesses in there, but in their aggregate, they're fundamental and really central to American businesses and American industry and to the American consumer. And when I combine those, it's really the unique opportunity we have to excel across those businesses. And that will continue. It's been our focus, and it'll very much continue to be our focus. If I start by looking at these results, I'll start with the insurance, total insurance. And I'm starting there because there's a couple really important points to make. You can see in 2026, the first quarter, we're actually up, quarter on quarter. And yet in the letter that I sent out just in February, highlighted the fact that we're unlikely to see stronger results in 2026. But there are some important points here. In 2025, we have an $860 million after-tax charge associated with California wildfires that we insured. The adjustment's not so important. It's just to highlight that the 2026 results and what we're feeling in the insurance industry right now, there's two things. One, our 2026 results do not reflect any catastrophic events. It was a pretty benign period. There were some storms in the northeast part of the United States, but relative to 2025 and past years, very benign. And that highlights again that the insurance, our insurance businesses, but the industry as a whole, the pricing we've talked about, that hardening, i.e., can you get the proper premium for risk? It's becoming a more challenging market. What's driving that? When you see a benign environment, and I'll touch on further results, another layer, but you start to see competition coming into the industry. They bring a variety of products and forms, but it's really they're bringing capital into the industry. So just wanted to really highlight, we still see that as a softening market, and I'll expand on that. Now, when we discuss insurance, we have two core objectives at Berkshire. We want to underwrite at a profit, so create a profit ultimately for our shareholders, but truly underwrite at a combined ratio, and I'll come back to it because there's a lot of insurance jargon here and there's a lot of numbers, so I'll come back to it. And then the second core objective is to increase our float. Now, the insurance jargon and the numbers on here. Go to the combined ratio on the left and go way over to the right, the 10-year average, 93%. I'll give you a little bit of color here. If we have a $100 premium that comes in associated with a policy, the 93% represents the costs incurred associated with that premium. It can be the cost of writing the premium, the commissions, or the loss reserve we set up. The 7%, i.e. $7 on $100, is our profit, our operating profit on that premium. And then if I go back to the $93, just roughly $23 of that would be the expenses, the administration of running the business. And that's just an average. It varies across our businesses, it varies across the industry. The other $70, and this is very important, that's actually what goes down into float. So when you see our float growing, we take that $70, it goes into our float, and we'll incur premiums against it over the years to come. And when the premium shows up, we pay out against that 70. But if you take a simple small commercial business or personal insurance, that $70 effectively gets paid out likely over a 3 to 4 year period. That premium sits there as float. We earn on it, and Warren's referenced it many times. It's a valued part of Berkshire, and it's really the opportunity to continue to create value for you as our owners and shareholders. You can see on the float, going back to 2015, it's effectively doubled through 2025. There's a small increase in the current quarter, but I wanted you to all see it, but it's not, the fact it increased, it could have decreased because it's just subject to the payment cycle we're in. The really core and important objective is that we grow it over the long run, and we'll continue to provide those type of updates to you as our owners. Now, if I go back up to the underwriting results, and you see the combined ratio again, but we'll focus on 2026. Primary and reinsurance, they're both 87%, 89.6%. The amazing thing there is that there's an 8 in that number. You can, again, our 10-year average is in the 93%, so we're actually realizing more operating insurance income profit there. Again, what's driving that? A very benign environment when you think of the catastrophic environment we insure into. The last time there was a hurricane that hit landfall in the U.S. was 19 months ago. So our quarterly results, our results last year do not reflect those type of outcomes. Again, that means we have more capital coming into that industry. Yes, we like those results, but the reality is as our insurance business softens and we cannot realize the value we should for the related risk, Ajit and our insurance team across the businesses, we start writing less premium. We still want to write it at an underwriting profit because there's still opportunities there, and there's a number of risks we'll insure, but we'll be much more cautious, and specifically across the primary and reinsurance businesses. Now let's move to Geico. As I highlighted, we have a new CEO. We're fortunate to have Nancy leading that team. They even have a better combined ratio, 87.3%. That means associated with that business, 12% plus operating income coming off of each dollar of premium we write there. Exceptional result. What's driven that is that 4 or 5 years ago, the Geico team stepped back and said that they felt they weren't, relative to the risk, getting the proper premium, the proper price for risk. And over the last 4 years, we've seen we have worked hard, the Geico team worked hard to get the proper balance across that. That meant our premiums went up for our customers across certain classes of drivers. They worked hard to segment that customer. And by the way, that happened across the auto industry, generally speaking. You saw an increase in the overall premium as they managed that underlying risk. Again, what's that mean to the industry? What's that mean to Geico? Well, one, there's a lot of folks out there pursuing those customers. Anytime you increase a customer's insurance premium, and especially over a period of time, and I'm talking about both Geico and our competitors, listen, people start evaluating and shopping, and we've seen unprecedented shopping activity across the auto space, and you see the advertising that's out there. They're pursuing customers, and they're pursuing the Geico customers. So yes, there's an important balance I want to highlight to all of you, is that, and this is what our Geico team's working on. Yes, we have to get the price to risk right, but there's 2 other important things we really need to balance. The second piece is we really do want to retain our customers. There's no more valued customer than our Geico customers. Many of you as shareholders and owners of Berkshire are Geico customers. We want to retain all of you. We want to retain every Geico customer. So as we found that right price to risk, the next challenge is making sure we retain our customers and Nancy and her team have that as a clear objective, and they're working hard on that. And then the third piece of that balance is to grow GEICO. How do we measure growth in that industry? It's policies in force. And if I touch on what we've experienced as growth in GEICO, if we go back to last quarter, 2025, versus this quarter, ending March of this year, our policies in force grew by 2%. Now, compare that to the number one competitor in our industry, Progressive. They just announced their first quarter results. They grew by 11%. And our team at GEICO fully acknowledge, as I said, that balance that they have to find across those the three metrics, including growth. It's not going to be easy to just restart the growth engine. We acknowledge that. But they understand the objective, and as we go through 26 and into 2027, two important objectives, as I said, they have is, okay, let's retain our customers, and let's start growing GEICO again. The last thing I'll just touch on, the insurance business, and it's Tokio Marine. I'm not going to expand a lot, but other than we announced the transaction in the fourth week of March, a great transaction by Ajit and his team, and it's a strategic transaction in that, and I'm highlighting that because yes, there's a financial aspect of it, and we're thrilled with that, but it is a long-term strategic partnership. And when Ajit's on stage, I'll have him expand on that. So well done, Ajit, and thank you to you and your team. A great transaction for Berkshire. Now we'll move to our non-insurance businesses. I'll start with BNSF. As I've highlighted, a number of our non-insurance businesses provide critical product services. BNSF is a great example of that. 32,500 miles of track in the West, moving core products for a number of customers that touch every industry in the U.S. You'll see the results, some improvement there. But what we really want to highlight today, and Katie will be joining me on stage, and she'll touch on this, is that we have a lot of work we know to do at BNSF. We have a great group of employees that have been working very hard, I would say, on the ground, boots on the ground. So you've heard me talk in the past that we have to work hard in our yards and work on how we can move our cars quicker and meet our customers' expectations. And we're doing a very good job on the customer service side, but we've recognized we've got to get better operationally. Our team's also been very focused on what resources do we have? Do we have too many locomotives? Because actually too many locomotives, it sounds counterintuitive, but can be a problem. You're just not you're not as efficient, but the congestion and everything comes with it. So our team's been very focused on that. And then how do we best use our employees? Well, that's something our team's working hard on, and we're working hard to become more efficient and more effective. But we also have to very much recognize where we are versus our industry peers. This is the 6 Class 1 railroads that operate in the U.S., and we're one of them. And you can see that last year, we were 5th out of 6. And that's a reality of where we are, but we're also getting better, and we are going to get better. We recognize that this performance is, as I've said, our teams have worked hard, but there's a lot of room for improvement. Now, the good news is, if I look at it in 2025, and what we have here is our operating margin. So the 34.5% you see for Berkshire, that's the operating profit that came back to BNSF associated with its underlying operations. That operating margin improved by 2.5%, 250 basis points. That's a very positive outcome, obviously. And by the way, in fairness to our team. That's the work they've been putting in. That on a nominal basis, that was the largest improvement across our 5 peers. So we're pleased with that, but we know there's a lot of work to be done. If you look at our first quarter results, happy to report that, okay, we went from 5th to 4th, but our team would be the first to say there's a lot more to be done. And if you look at our overall operating margin there, very consistent with the result last year, and the efficiency we've delivered is being maintained and improved versus the quarter over the quarter of 2025. So again, we see a lot of opportunity here to continue to get better, but to achieve where, say, Union Pacific is as a leader with an operating margin of 39.5%, we know that's going to require a step change, both as how we're operating, but even how we approach our operations. An important step that or something we've identified, we like to identify the gaps and where we can get better, is technology. And we're doing a lot at BNSF, and I'll touch on our other businesses here when I go through technology. But that's where we see a step change or potentially where a few of our peers have gapped out versus how we're using technology. I'm going to back up to Geico, and then I'll come back to BNSF. Because it was approximately 4 years ago, I was in a Geico meeting with our management team there, and they were discussing this price to risk and segmenting customers. And we had our operational team from Geico, they had the commercial team, but they had the tech team there. And they're often there, and you're looking for some help. But what I heard in that discussion was a clear technology transformation that was happening at Geico. It was obvious that the technology was going to be a big part of the solution as Geico tackled their certain challenges. And as that meeting wrapped up, I very much wanted to spend more time with the technology team to understand what was driving this, and they were calling it a technology transformation, because I could see that it was so applicable to what we were going to do, what we needed to do, and what we would pursue across our non-insurance businesses. So what is this technology transformation that they described at Geico? I'll summarize it in a few different ways, but first and foremost, we recognized we were going to become a builder of technology rather than just a buyer of technology. And that meant that we had a number of systems, and we often bought the related applications or software that came with it. And yes, it's a valued application, but it was disconnected from all our systems, obviously. We didn't have that ability to then use the information, get to the data. And what they started to talk about is simplifying the infrastructure, making sure we would build what we needed ourselves and deliver solutions back to our customers, and we would have clear access to the data. All things that make a lot of sense, but a massive challenge, and it doesn't happen overnight, and we're still on that journey at Geico in year 5, there's no question. But quickly recognize that this could be used across our other businesses. Very fortunate that at Geico they had put their leadership team in place to drive forward this transformation. And the most senior leader then came from Geico, joined our non-insurance operations, took on a senior leadership role, the leadership role helping us with the technology transformation at Berkshire Hathaway Energy, and then also as a senior technology officer at BNSF. So we started down that journey. And one of the first things you have to do is say, okay, we need a different resource base. So now we're hiring engineers, we hire developers in our technology group that help us start to build the solutions we need for these businesses. And it's going beyond Geico now. And we still have our valued employees there, and they may be retraining or transitioning to other roles. But the reality is we need less people managing the applications and the software and more people building outcomes that our businesses need. Now, when I asked our team, well, how does AI fit into this artificial intelligence? Well, it's actually a big piece of this because it's effectively what goes on top of a lot of our systems. And that's what they're building. They're using AI to build applications. And that's all great, but we also know there's certain risks around humanity. There's risks, and there's the broader risk for globally and for our country. But there's also risks within our businesses. And as they just start heading down this path, I said, well, okay, how should we think about this? How should we all be comfortable we're approaching this correctly? And they said, well, we don't really like to call it artificial intelligence. They call it narrow artificial intelligence. And they have three really important principles associated with it. And the first one was that, yes, we're using it, and we'll use it with these engineers we have and these highly skilled individuals we brought in, but how are we going to manage it? Well, the first thing was that we still have our employees, our senior management team involved in implementing the recommendations that we then receive associated with the architecture or the framework they put in place. There may be things that still occur and should occur, just like they did within our systems or within that. But as it moves up and the important decisions are being made, there's human involvement. Our managers, our employees are involved. And that's part of the governance that's effectively in place. The second piece is what they call the safeguard. And the safeguard is very intriguing because right away, of course, we all want good governance. We want that in place. But what's that mean? And our team said, okay, here's how I would describe it. If we ask for an outcome, we want a recommendation or an action, and we ask it now, and then half hour later we ask, do we get the exact same outcome? If we can receive that same outcome, it's effectively the safeguard. We know we're utilizing that application properly, and importantly, it means we've got a defined data set that we're comfortable with. And I like to call it the constraint. We know we're constraining our data. We know what data we're using, and we know what data is coming in. Now, when you talk about all the operations that we're focused on, yes, the next day of operations come in, and it updates that data set, and we may get a different, if we ask the question the day later, we'll get a marginally different answer. It's got new information. But if we ask it, well, if you ignore today's information and just focused on yesterday, do we get the same answer? Yes. So we call that our safeguard. And then the third thing on technology and associated with this narrow AI is it has to be additive to our businesses. We're not going to do AI for the sake of AI. You can spend a lot of money in this area, and we need to know what we're trying to achieve, and do we see a valued proposition for the businesses. So that's what we call narrow AI. And if you see how it's starting to be applied at BNSF, it's incredible. So if I think of BNSF, we have the expansive network I touched on. We have a variety of trains leaving from a variety of points every day. I've touched on it can be the intermodal trains of 150 to 200 on our tracks a day, which are moving very quickly and often leaving LA to deliver product in Chicago 48 hours later, or it can be in the last quarter. We had more than 750 trains a day moving across that system. There's weather, there's equipment failures. We share our tracks. We allow Amtrak to use them. They can be running on time or they can be running behind schedule. We have to adjust to that. And the reality is, Katie and her team, they have a system that's been running for 177 years, but we were not there in how we could use technology to operate that better. And that's what we're using, or we've just started down the path of, that's how we know we'll see that step change in our operating performance. Now, to summarize it, all that, but I want to let you know it's all around operational excellence. We are going to get better at rail, but we're going to use that framework across all of our businesses. They very much will create the framework, and then our teams can embrace it if they so choose, and we'll help them see the value of it. But there is an opportunity there. And I'll break it down with one last comment around technology. When you think of artificial intelligence, everybody talks about the large language models, and okay, they're learning models, and there's a lot more to it than I just highlighted. But I summarize it as one thing, and this is why there's an opportunity across all our businesses. Those large language models, I really communicate them, and I communicate them to our teams, or at least it helps me understand it. They're large logic models. At this point in time, we're using it to solve logical challenges in our business. And what we're trying to do it is in a more efficient fashion, you do it more quickly and get to a better answer. So that was a lot in technology, but it touches the whole franchise of Berkshire. If I move to energy now and provide an update there, I'm just going to touch on the opportunity first and then come to the challenges. Because as I've just discussed technology, that's the opportunity in energy. One of the core inputs to all those data centers, hyperscalers associated with artificial intelligence is energy. Our businesses have that opportunity in front of them at Berkshire Hathaway Energy. And yes, we're pursuing them, and we'll do it. I'll touch on it in a way we view as the right approach for both our states and our customers. But I would highlight it's not new to us. If you just go across the river a little bit east to Iowa, we serve just under 50% of that state. If you look at the number of data centers and hyperscalers in that state, it's very significant. We have 4 very large hyperscalers, data centers there, or builders of them, and ultimately their customers using it. But if I look at our peak load, i.e. the amount of energy being used from those data centers, it's at 8% of their peak load. And the only reason I highlight that 8% is when I hear people in the industry and all the utilities around us, a lot of states, they're talking about this great opportunity, and geez, hopefully in the next 5 years, they'll be from a relatively starting point. They want to get to the 5 to 10%. And we're already at 8, and we see opportunities to grow that by 50% over the next 5 years, or potentially more. But we'll do it in a way, and you're starting to hear more and more of this across the US, we'll do it in a way where we're not going to impact the costs of our other customers. These users of i.e. the hyperscalers, the data centers, and the users of the energy, they have to bear their full cost. We can't transfer that burden across all our other customers. And that's a principle we've applied across all our utilities and from the very early goings when we're building these data centers. And I would highlight, I think our team's doing an exceptional job of that. If I again go back to Mid-American, if you look at with all the data centers and hyperscalers and the infrastructure they put in place, their rates are still 45% below the national average. That's just unheard of. It's an exceptional outcome, and it just highlights they're doing the right things when they build this infrastructure, or it's a part of it. And we would highlight we have similar positive outcomes across the rest of our utilities. Now, and I would note one other thing. Our gas network, or our infrastructure there, our large pipeline company we have there, as they build out all this infrastructure, not just in our utilities, but across the U.S., our pipeline footprint will grow. A lot of it's being built by natural gas, and we'll meet that challenge. But here's an interesting point. 15% of the gas consumed in the natural gas consumed in the United States is touched by our pipeline network, or one of our core assets there. So again, that's the opportunity on the energy side. But it's not without its challenges, and we've talked about this the past few years. And when I think of the Berkshire Hathaway Energy Group, what's the challenge? It's what I call the regulatory compact. We leave your capital, our owner's capital, Berkshire's capital in these businesses, and often a portion of the earnings that they generate, we may reinvest back into those businesses. And for that, we get a very specific set of return. And it's over the long run, it's been a very balanced and fair return. But how do you measure that? It's versus the risks we take on in that business. And that's the compact. Okay, you're going to pay us X% return, and what risks are you asking us to take? And that model has worked very good for a number of years and for centuries. But the problem is it's becoming more stressed. If you think of inflation, if you think of the data center challenges, but I strongly believe we're managing that separately, and then you move to assets that are 60 to 100 years old that are starting to retire, and we bring those into the network, the challenge is every day to get more efficient, more effective from the operational side. But as a regulator, as a governor, you're very focused on, I don't want my rates to go up. I don't want to take on more risk. They want to transfer that back to us. And that's the regulatory compact. And unless that exists, we do not, if we don't see that balance, we don't deploy our capital back into those businesses or into those utilities. And we work hard to maintain it. But there's been a very important challenge we've had within that. We've touched on in the past too, and that's wildfires. Wildfires in the West, very prevalent the last 15 plus years in California. We experienced a very significant wildfire in Oregon in 2020, or a number of wildfires across Oregon, but we being the state, but also the company. So there were a number of wildfires across the state. We had certain equipment, certain high winds, we had certain failures with our equipment that contributed to those fires. And associated with that, we fully acknowledged where there was causation and where we were responsible for it. But there was also associated with some of the fires, and specifically one fire, a class action lawsuit that was had very large claims against our utility there, Pacific Corp. And we had to approach it such that we'd resolve all the other matters, but that was a class action. And there was specifically one fire that we strongly felt we weren't responsible for. There was zero causation. There was an Oregon Forestry Department report that said that Pacific Corp did not contribute nor cause the fire. We took a very strong position there. That one, we were not going to put more capital in to fund the entity in these type of risks and these type of obligations. And secondly, we would challenge that liability verdict. And we challenged it. It's been a long process. But as owners and shareholders, and this was a very significant event that occurred in this past quarter, or occurred in April, we're very fortunate that it was up to the appellate court. They reversed and remanded that liability verdict and said, back to ground zero, start over again. And what they were really saying was that class of customers and who did we actually affect and where was the causation, that will be revisited, and then the related damages. Some positive things associated with it. We recover $1 billion of security we've already posted. The people, the law firms that pursued it are responsible for our costs associated that period of time. Not our litigation costs, but the costs we incurred in posting the bonds or posting that security. That's $10 million or approaching likely $10 million. So, but the most important thing is we've reset the stage there. And that's very important because we're working hard to get that regulatory compact balanced and getting the right outcome. And we do want to see these utilities move forward. And we want to be a very good operator and steward of those assets for our customers. So the last thing I'll just touch on wildfires. So When you think of Pacific Corp, yes, we've addressed that challenge, but to get the right compact, we've worked with Wyoming, Idaho, I've touched on Utah on this stage to say it requires a judicial system that supports the legislature